Well, now it's time for our keynote speaker. And today's keynote speaker was supposed to be General Richardson, the Commanding General of Aviation Missile Life Cycle Management Command, AMCOM, from Huntsville. However, he's in Washington, D.C., and definitely sends his regret. I talked to him on the phone yesterday a couple times, and he's doing well. In his stead, though, he sent his deputy, Mr. Bill Marriott. Bill has been a deputy for a few months now. I'm sure he's still learning a lot about AMCOM. He came over from Army Materiel Command. And please don't take this wrong, but as I was reading the biography, there's only one thing that I have a hard time with. He's a Naval Academy grad, but unfortunately, we'll have to listen to that in December again, I'm afraid. So, but we're glad to have you, and welcome, Bill.
I'll try to keep this as painless as possible. Could you go to my first slide, please? I generally don't like to present slides, but this is what I kind of inherited last week when it was discovered that General Richardson had to be up in Washington, D.C. Bill Marriott, the Deputy to the Commanding General, as Brigadier General Retired Sinclair just mentioned. And I'm here on behalf of General Richardson, who really wanted to be here. He spent a lot of time on these slides. Unfortunately, didn't spend any time on the notes. So those I did myself, and you'll have to kind of bear with me as I put my own spin on it based on my own background. Before I get started, though, I do want to acknowledge Corpus Christi Army Depot for hosting this, Brigadier General Sinclair and your great team for all that you do to enhance and support Army Aviation. I'd like to especially thank the Luce and the Jones family. I don't know that they're still here or not, but for their contributions to Army Aviation. And I have a deep respect for Army Aviation and especially helicopter aviation, as my father was one of the first Navy helicopter pilots in the mid-1950s, and I myself was a naval aviator. I'll talk about that in just a second. But I'd also like to thank our distinguished guests, city officials, current and former and wannabe aviators, leaders, industry partners. Thank you all for being here today. This is quite a setup and quite a room. I was looking at as I came in last night, and I thought that there are runways I've landed on that have not been this long. Of course, maybe I was landing the wrong way on them. But my background is one of, as I mentioned, naval aviation. I was a P3 driver. So back in 1980, Corpus Christi was my last stop before getting my wings, and I was winged here. In 1980, I got to spend about 6 or 7 months here. And a lot has changed since 1980. A lot hasn't changed. There was still the SPID, there was still the HEBs, there's still the wind, there's still the runway. But there's some things that really have changed. In 1980, our federal spending was $591 billion. Today, the request for the Department of Defense is about that same amount. In 1980, we broke diplomatic ties with Iran. And as you all know, we are now on a path to retie those relationships and reopen ties with Iran. In 1980, CNN was started, and now it's hard to imagine a world without CNN. It's ubiquitous. In 1980, Texas went 7-5. It's their football team, not their volleyball team. And an SEC team won the national championship. This year, I think Texas has to go undefeated to be 7-5. And an SEC team will win the national championship again. Roll Tide. There you go. I no longer wear those Navy wings I earned back in October, November of 1980. But I am still married to the same lovely lady that I was a newlywed with back in 1980. So that's probably my greatest accomplishment. Next slide, please. There's some things I want to leave you with, and I'll cover these throughout the course of the presentation, the main themes. And I'll close with these again, just to hit them again. That's kind of the Navy way. Tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them and tell them what you told them. So that's what we're going to do today. And none of these are surprises, I don't think. We're operating in a time of great uncertainty and unpredictability. Threats which we had not imagined a decade ago are very real right now. Whether it's turbulence in the Middle East, Chinese ventures in the South China Sea, the Russians in Ukraine, or the actions of the North Koreans, our nation finds itself with potential threats in every direction we look around the globe. To ensure we can provide readiness for our soldiers wherever they find themselves, we must have a healthy, modern, and viable industrial base. To remain able to meet requirements, we must continue to invest in the proper technologies, equipment, and personnel now and in the future. Key to this investment must be the realization the Army's organic industrial base is a national security insurance policy. Let me give you an example. Corpus Christi, as you've heard, as you know, is a one-of-a-kind DoD repair facility, yet due to the location and aging infrastructure, it is extremely vulnerable to flooding. All of you, many of you were here during that time several months ago, where CCAD had to cease operations due to flooding caused by the heavy rains. We had another incident just a few weeks ago as well. While the depot was able to recover fairly quickly, there was a significant time and money loss. The depot averages, if you did it on an average, about $17 to $18 million a week in revenue. They were down for about, 10 days or so? So you can do the math on that. And through the fantastic effort of Colonel Pogue and the employees, they were able to make up much of that, but it still showed the incredible vulnerability. They've had hurricanes here before. Many of you probably have lived through those. Another strong hurricane, similar to what New Orleans saw in Katrina, and you felt the effects of, could be catastrophic. The loss would be felt throughout Army Aviation and the Department of Defense. So if that happened, who would pick up the workload should CCAD be shut down for an extended period of time? More importantly, if United States organizations were unable to rapidly respond, would the work go overseas? I just don't believe that would be in line with our national security strategy. To ensure CCAD remains viable, we must continue to invest in the infrastructure and the workforce. Just as you all pay your insurance premiums to ensure you have support in case of emergencies, CCAD, as part of the Army's organic industrial base, is also a national security insurance policy enabling DoD to respond with capacity, readiness, and unique capabilities rapidly in support of our joint warfighters around the world. However, the combination of sequestration, budget uncertainty, and the reduction of combat operations have created significant pressure on our ability to sustain workload at CCAD, as Garner had mentioned. Over the past several years, unpredictable budgets and year-to-year funding have had a negative impact on morale, our ability to maintain efficient industrial operations, and keeping our workforce viable. This unpredictability also impacts our public-private partnerships, which play such an important role in maintaining our industrial base. To keep our rates competitive, it is important that we provide predictable workload for CCAD and appropriate policies which allow the depot to remain relevant and viable. As we move forward, CCAD will be positioned to respond to the needs of the nation through building additional partnerships that are mutually beneficial in training, sustainment, and foreign military sales. But our planning for the future is only as good as the predictability and funding level of our budget. Today, we operate under a continuing resolution that puts us under sequestration levels, or worse. The continuing resolution only funds the government through the 11th of December, and the President has said he will not sign another short-term resolution. Secretary of Defense Carter has said that he expects this uncertainty to persist, and without a negotiated budget solution, we will again return to sequestration, reducing our budget to its lowest level in a decade after adjusting for inflation. Unfortunately, we have become accustomed to both budget cuts and budget uncertainty. And unless the Budget Control Act is repealed, sequestration will be around for 7 or more years. And we're feeling its effects. The Army plans to cut 15,000 soldiers in fiscal 2016 for an end strength of 475, another 15,000 in fiscal 2017, and another 10,000 in 2018, for an eventual end strength of 450,000. In total, the Army will have cut 120,000 active component soldiers, or 21% of the active force since 2012. The Army also will cut about 17,000 Army civilians and shrink its two-star and higher headquarters by 25%. The cuts could go even deeper if sequestration returns later this year when a budget is passed. So as we attempt to plan for the uncertainty ahead, CCAD must be considered a priority, a critical component of the Army's organic industrial base and resourced to enable joint force readiness and meet future surge requirements. To do this, we are going to need to get better at prioritizing our limited resources. That's why forums such as the Luther G. Jones Aviation Summit and organizations like the one that you belong to, that General Sinclair runs, are so important. The opportunities to network, build relationships, and discuss Army aviation needs are critical as we look to provide readiness at the point of need for the Army now and the Army in 2025 and beyond. Next slide. I think it's a requirement of Army briefings. Mission and vision statements are included. This one was included in the package that General Richardson put together, and it's important that we note a couple of things about it. In addition to supporting aviation and missile systems, AMCOM supports all of the Army's test, measurement, and diagnostic equipment. That's a big mission, and it's a critical enabler to the maintenance of every system in the Army. Like all our other support, we push our resources forward to our customers' locations to provide the readiness support our soldiers need when they need it. What's not on here, but what I'd also like to note, is that we do significant foreign military sales business. It's not part of this because USASAC, the Army Security Assistance Command, actually has the overall mission and responsibility. But we do significant business in foreign military sales. This year, more than $7 billion with a B dollars worth of that business. I believe in the future this could be the lifeblood of Corpus Christi as our employees work the foreign military sales. They work it as a complete package to include repairables, to include recap, to include all the maintenance and sustainment of those systems, and they've been very, very successful in that. It's a business line we will certainly look to expand in the future. Next slide, please. In addition to our world-class workforce here in Corpus Christi, other AMCOM employees support Army missions around the world. The sun never sets on AMCOM, as you can see by those locations. We're with our soldiers. Wherever they need our support, we position ourselves there. Not shown here because the mission ended earlier this year was an AMCOM presence in West Africa. During the U.S. Army response to the recent Ebola crisis, AMCOM was there with Logistics Assistant Representatives, or LARs, with emergency deliveries of spare parts, and with equipment support packages. We can deploy to where the Army sends its soldiers on short notice. Even today, our LARs are in support of the National Guard Bureau in the Carolinas and the 82nd CAB in North Carolina in relief of the severe flooding they had over this past weekend. Next slide, please. As was mentioned earlier, Corpus Christi Army Depot is unique. The largest and the best rotary wing depot in the world, with unmatched capabilities to perform a multitude of repair, overhaul, and fabrication tasks. I won't even try to mention everything our wonderful team at Corpus Christi does, but this slide has some summary statistics that give you an idea of the breadth and depth of work that's performed there. Many of you perform that work, and I thank you for that. I do want to mention two unique aspects of CCAD that I think are important to note. First, crash damage repair. During the war years, we shipped numerous wrecked aircraft back to CCAD, and the depot's employees rebuilt them from the wheels up, which was critical to equipping our forces for the fight. Second is partnerships. On the left-hand side, you can see some of our OEM partners. CCAD has led the way for the Army in establishing productive partnerships with prime manufacturers and suppliers, many of whom are here today. Many of you here today are involved in those efforts, and I thank you for that. CCAD's partnerships in the past have significantly contributed to the depot's ability to support Army Aviation's readiness requirements, and I expect our ability to form meaningful partnerships to be key to us meeting the Army's readiness requirements in the future. Next slide, please. To understand the importance of CCAD, I think it's important to understand where AMCOM itself, their higher headquarters, fits in the big picture of Army Aviation. We're part of the Institutional Army, along with Training and Doctrine Command and the Army Acquisition Corps, the PEOs, the program managers. TRADOC, led by General David Perkins, is the organization that consults with our warfighters, the Joint Force, and the strategists, and they define the requirements for equipment that the Army needs, and they're depicted in the orange there. The acquisition community, led by the Honorable Heidi Shue, the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology, performs a difficult task of turning those requirements into weapons systems and equipment and putting these systems into the hands of our soldiers, and they're depicted in the green, if you can see that. We at Army Aviation and Missile Lifecycle Management Command, along with our sister LCMCs and the Army Material Command, sustain these weapon systems and equipment. As you may know, sustainment costs are typically around 70% of the lifetime cost of a weapon system. We also provide support to the acquisition effort and consult with the TRADOC capability managers on requirements, but aviation and missile system readiness and sustainment are our main effort. Patches on the right side of this chart signify the warfighting units who train on and fight the Army's aviation and missile systems. They are our main focus. Everything else we do is designed to support their requirements. Our core competencies are listed on the bottom left of the slide. These 6 core competencies: support to acquisition, sustainment logistics, the organic industrial base, field and sustainment maintenance, calibration, and security assistance, form the basis for our future planning and will inform and enable the transition of AMCOM to better support the Army of 2025 and beyond. Next slide, please. Although not to scale, this slide depicts our budget and how it's grown and how it's declining. After every one of our nation's conflicts, we've seen a reduction in resources, both funding and people, and today's situation is no different. The light green line represents our base budget from 2001 to 2015 with respect to overseas contingency operations, formerly called GWAT, and the supplemental funding that's associated with that. You can see that over the course of time, we were able to operate effectively through a combination of the 2 funding sources, both our base appropriated funds and the overseas contingency operations, the OCO supplemental funds, with OCO funds over time becoming a larger and larger share. Then about 2012, 2013, as combat was falling off, was being reduced, OCO funds were also reduced during that transition. We still rely on OCO funding today, although a smaller amount is available than in past years. This would be fine if our base budget was growing to meet the requirements, but it is not. That's our challenge for the future, to match our requirements to the available resources. Under sequestration, this is an especially difficult problem. As former Chief of the Staff of the Army, General Odierno, described it, he had 3 rheostats that he could adjust: readiness, modernization, and force structure. Should sequestration remain, we will suffer in all 3 areas. Above all else, however, we must avoid falling below the sustainable readiness level that our nation requires. The availability of wartime funding dollars has been a blessing and has enabled Army Aviation to upgrade the fleet in multiple ways. The UH-60 Mike and the CH-47 Foxtrot acquisitions, UH-60 Alpha to Lima conversions, the reset of deployed equipment, and of course spare parts acquisitions. All of these actions allowed us to achieve numerous positive measurements of performance as listed in the green box towards the middle of the slide. We're still reaping the benefits of generous wartime funding today. Our readiness rates are high, we are still upgrading selected fleets, and we are still resetting combat equipment. But now we face a significant decline in funding in 2016 and beyond. We're planning for that, while also developing a transition plan to get us to Army Aviation's next waypoint, Army 2025. It won't be easy, but our focus and goal will be to successfully execute the transition while keeping readiness rates high and our warfighters ready to deploy and fight. Next slide, please. This chart shows the AMCOM 2025 roadmap by which we'll continue to support our nation's warfighting requirements while also making the necessary changes to support the Army as it transitions to the force and vision for the year 2025. It's important to note two things. While 2025 may sound like it's a long way off, it's not. Right now, the POM process, where we budget, is looking at 18 to 22. So it really isn't that far off. And so the transitioning planning is truly a set of near and intermediate term goals. We also have longer term goals, both as an Army and within AMCOM and CCAD. These are focused heavily on the research and development tasks associated with the early stages of an acquisition program, identifying the feasible technology solutions that can help the Army meet stated future force warfighting requirements. I'll talk to some of that in a little while. For now, let me talk about the closer range targets. Our mission remains unchanged as we execute current operations while transitioning to the Army of 2025. To get to any end state, you have to identify those key tasks that must be done, and these are our 6 core competencies, as I mentioned earlier, and listed in blue with the arrows. AMCOM employees work these 6 mission areas every single day and will continue to do so in the future. But our execution of these is neither static nor routine. Major General Richardson has challenged the AMCOM workforce, including those at CCAD, to find ways to innovate, achieve cost savings, and better use available resources in every mission area, and you all are stepping up to the challenge. We've identified the outcomes here, presented in the dark blue, that we are seeking as we transform. Incorporating sustainment lessons learned into our acquisition process, modernizing our support infrastructure, and especially our industrial base at Corpus Christi and Letterkenny Army depots. Exploiting our foreign military sales programs to help keep production lines warm and costs of U.S. spare parts low. And across all 6 competencies, recruiting, training, and retaining highly capable and adaptable leaders and employees. Doing all of this will enable our ability to support current operations while also incorporating efficiencies, capital improvements, and a more capable workforce. If you've ever served in the Pentagon, a comment that you commonly hear is a vision without resources is just a hallucination. And without predictable budget and repeal of sequestration, our vision may be more hope than strategy. Next slide, please. Let me shift gears a little bit and talk about another initiative we launched that offers our partners a chance, our industry partners, a chance to not only share your good ideas and help us reduce and avoid costs while utilizing your experience and expertise and make some money at it while you're doing it. Our Army Working Capital Fund Investment Program is an initiative by which we hope to gather ideas from industry on ways to manufacture new parts and systems that will perform better, cost less than parts we normally use. One example of how this program works is what we achieved with the Army Oil Analysis Program. The problem was mandatory recurring oil sampling of aviation systems gearboxes without a correlated proven benefit has proven to be too frequent with potential to damage equipment and added to unscheduled maintenance downtime. AMCOM funded a reliability-centered maintenance analysis intended to discover ways to safely extend or eliminate oil sampling intervals. $150,000 cost was the total investment in a study that yielded the following extensions. For the UH-60, from every 40 hours to 360 hours. For the 47s, from 50 hours to 400 hours. For the 64s, oil sampling intervals were eliminated. Oil changed at 250 hours. And this all resulted in a cost avoidance of nearly $7 million annually across those 3 systems alone. Another example is the charged couple device, the CCD camera redesign. The problem was the CCD camera used by the improved Bradley acquisition system has a high failure rate and uses obsolete technology. The solution, $410,000 investment in 2010, led to engineering, testing, and fielding an improved CCD in 2012. Old CCDs are being replaced through attrition. The replacement CCD is cheaper and incorporates current technology. 10-year savings are projected to be approximately $12.5 million. These are just a couple of examples of successful investments that have achieved savings or cost avoidance. Now we're expanding the program, and I'll briefly cover the details of how we will execute it and what we hope to accomplish. Next slide, please. This chart provides a little more background on the AWCOF investment program. The Army has a continuing need to maintain weapon systems readiness, as you all know, to modernize equipment and significantly reduce our long-term ownership costs. These will be key as we move forward in an era of limited resources. This program is just one element of DoD's strategy to address these needs through secondary items. Congressional language and authorization bills over the last 10 years has greatly expanded our opportunities by knocking down barriers for Army Aviation and missile AWCOF investment projects to reduce the sustainment burden through secondary items. The congressional language that establishes the program allows for us to use AWCOF hardware dollars to pay for the developmental, engineering, and qualification and acceptance testing of parts and systems, both of which were very difficult challenges to fund as a sustainment command. Army Material Command allows investment opportunity of up to 2.5% of our annual AMCOM AWCOF operating authority. In fiscal year 15, it was nearly $60 million, estimated about $47 million for fiscal year 16 for both aviation and missile commands. Although the total investment is coming down along with our budgets, we will continue to use this program as an opportunity for funding our highest priorities that fall within the program requirements. But as the funds diminish, it's more important now than ever for our depots and industry partners to address this challenge together, which again shows the value of this summit that we're attending today. Next chart, please. This chart shows some of the various places where we might get project ideas that address our sustainment issues. The consolidated analysis playbook process is AMCOM's framework to focus on the biggest draws against the working capital fund. The analysis process starts with the integrated priority list. It's a comprehensive list of all active AMCOM managed components ranked by cost burden. Once we know where we're spending most of the money, we can then selectively target what we want to address to reduce costs. Next, once we know which parts to address, this info is fed into the component analysis, where additional data is gathered and analyzed, looking for opportunities to extend usable life, reduce demands, reduce maintenance man hours, etc. Following this, we have a root cause working group effort, which looks at why units are buying spares. Is there process improvement that's needed? A behavior change. Is this a statistical anomaly due to demographic location? Or is there an AWCOF investment project warranted? Moving down the chart, AMC also champions a standardized focus on obsolescence, using best practices which frequently result in AWCOF projects. We get a lot of our projects through this process. Moving down again, prime vendors are typically as part of the contract, they're required to continuously address obsolescence. They work with the PMs to identify and submit potential AWCOF investment projects. Moving further down, the next box is an area of strong focus for us now, the one that's in red. Industry. And we are anxious to get a wider industry footprint than just the OEMs that we have now. If industry has a technology, a process, or any idea that will help us address a sustainment issue, then we want to know about it. And I'll show you how to go about that on the next chart in just a second. Lastly, we have other there, any other source, and we've seen projects that deal with a DLA-managed item as opposed to an AMCOM-managed item, but touches an AMCOM-supported commodity. Again, we want to know what the project entails so we can figure out how to get at the potential goodness it could bring. Next slide. To help smooth the process, we've developed a website that can be reached off the Competition Management Office portal, which is open to the public. Even from here, I can't read that chart. Hopefully you'll get it on the when it's posted. But the one thing I would tell you to take away from this chart, the most important thing to me is in the very bottom, that website. And our folks, John Jensen, Josh Kennedy, are here. They'll be able to help you connect to that, as will our CCAD leadership. The AWCOF projects link, second from the top on the left-hand side, the website's been designed as a mechanism to provide you with as much information as we are allowed to put on a public domain. The site provides access to our integrated priority lists, which are the top cost drivers, some technical information, a way to reach out to the program managers or PEOs for project coordination and endorsement, frequently asked questions, and points of contact to answer any questions you may have. The POCs are within AMCOM Logistics Center, again represented today by our Aviation Director, John Jensen, our PEOs and program managers. It's important to mention that both government-submitted projects and a project submitted by industry will be templated and treated exactly the same. Both will be evaluated the same way by the same subject matter experts. Both have the same entry point, and all projects submitted are evaluated, and all eventually go to Major General Richardson and the two PEOs for a potential project approval at a project approval decision brief, which is held twice per year. That GO panel will see every project, not just those being recommended for approval by the evaluation team. All team recommendations have to be defended to those GOs prior to any information being forwarded to AMC, and all project submitters get feedback on their ideas. So this is a win-win for us and for those of you in industry who are interested in this. Next slide, please. This slide lists some of the successes we've seen over the years. We've committed funds to multiple projects in each category and have achieved success across all supported systems. And we will continue to invest in similar projects in the future. The cost avoidances and savings are significant, and of note, these savings or avoidances continue over the remaining life cycle of a system. Some other things I'd like to mention about the AWCOF investment program. It's a model program for the Department of Defense deployed across all services. It provides an innovative use of AWCOF hardware dollars, typically earmarked for spare parts acquisition only, and it has great potential for small business involvement. Next slide. I just want to talk very briefly about research and development efforts underway that over time should enable us to reduce the cost of sustaining our aircraft. One specifically is a zero maintenance aircraft, or ZMA, concept. ZMA is just one example of many efforts trying to identify ways to reduce or even eliminate the maintenance burden our units carry. Next slide, please. So every single day, General Richardson, myself, John Jensen, our leadership, along with Corpus Christi, along with Letterkenny leadership, along with Army leadership, certainly in the G4 and Army, look at the readiness rates we have every day for our rotary wing, fixed wing, and missiles. I'll just talk about rotary wing. Across the globe, because I briefed this yesterday, when we looked at every one of our theaters, we'll take out FORSCOM units, but all our deployed rotary aircraft, of all of the aircraft we had, only five were down for supply, not mission capable for supply. Across our entire fleet, including FORSCOM assets, every single one of our helo types, our MDSs, are at 4% or less for supply. This is historic low. However, the maintenance time, the M time, not mission capable for maintenance, we've seen that rise over the years. So you can understand why our goal would be to go after the M time and try to reduce maintenance. It's almost a holy grail to have zero maintenance on an aircraft. It might be a dream now, but I tell you, there's a lot of people working it. The immediate goal will be to capitalize on the lessons we've learned from condition-based maintenance to move towards greater improvements with a targeted end state of zero maintenance in our future vertical lift fleets. The intermediate goal is to use the knowledge we've gained by CBM digital source collectors and health and usage monitors to extend component life and give our units longer maintenance-free operating periods. Next slide, please. This slide provides some hints of how we'll transform maintenance doctrine to support a fleet with different capabilities. Along with our partners at AMERDEC, we will pursue the goal of zero maintenance using more reliable designs, health-based adaptive controls, prognosis-based inspections and maintenance scheduling, and intelligent network sensors. The goal, again, is a shift away from manual maintenance driven by schedule towards self-awareness and adaptive maneuvers. Future vertical lift may have digital thread, which provides the continuity through design, production, sustainment, logistics, and training. Combined with virtual reality techniques, it provides a digital twin of each aircraft by tail number that can be visualized by the designer, maintainer, trainer, and the maneuver commander, enabling them to make real-time decisions and perform real and analytical tasks, as well as see in real time the status of the aircraft. Involving the equipment designers, the maintainers, the trainers, and the commanders in a real-time discussion of a maintenance or repair issue is revolutionary thinking. And if the efforts of our acquisition professionals and our scientists and engineers result in parts and components that never or rarely fail, then these conversations on maintenance will not occur very often. The goal is to ensure that high reliability, maintainability, and health-based monitoring are addressed and included in concept design, as well as in the key performance parameters, our future vertical lift platforms. To do this, Major General Richardson has made it a priority to ensure that AMCOM is part of the acquisition discussions early in the acquisition process. And since we currently spend about 70% of a weapon system total life cycle costs in sustaining it, improving reliability and maintainability is a smart investment. Next slide, please. The chart lays out a roadmap for us to get to zero maintenance. There are a lot of moving parts and pieces to this, but it's not impossible. In fact, industry is far ahead of the military in implementing many of these steps now. There is an upfront cost to all this, so we'll have to make the case for the return on investment, but I'm confident that we can do that. Some examples of processes and policies that must evolve: examination-based maintenance, or EBM policy, for maintenance-free operating period, that approach, to fully implement IUID. Single point automated data transfer to maintenance and logistics supply chain, and efficient common material and design qualification and certifications. Next slide, please. And this is my final slide. Okay, I told you I'd put up here what I want to leave you with. And again, I want to hit those points. Our depots, Corpus Christi Army Depot, is a national security insurance policy, poised and ready to be able to meet any surge requirements of our joint warfighters now and in the future. We can only do this if we continue to invest in the infrastructure and our people. Unless repealed, sequestration is going to make it extremely difficult to continue those investments. Right now, it's programmed to be around another 7 years. During this time of budget uncertainty, prioritization is the enemy of uncertainty, and that's what we're going to do, and that's what we're going to ask CCAD and Letterkenny and AMCOM ourselves. We'll do prioritize where our resources need to go. And we will continue, as we do this, to seek partnerships that are mutually beneficial. And lastly, as the blue banner on the bottom of the chart indicates, no matter the initiative or who leads the effort, for the Army Aviation enterprise to thrive in the future, it's going to take a team. AMC, AMCOM, CCAD, Letterkenny, and our Army, DoD, and industry partners must be in sync, working together to meet the requirements of our joint warfighters and delivering readiness at the point of need. Thank you very much for being here today. Thank you for your attention. I hope you have a productive and successful seminar. Stay Army strong. Thank you.